Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unarmored Talk podcast, where we will have real life conversations to help you develop an accurate way of thinking. And the way we're going to do this is by gaining a better understanding of how feelings, emotions, and thoughts can influence the outcome of a personal or professional challenge. I'm your host, Mario P. Fields, and today's guest is Dawud Akil. He's an entrepreneur. I mean, he's involved in multiple things. I stopped counting last year. And he's also a United States Marine Corps veteran. Dawud, welcome to Unarmored Talk podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much, Sergeant Major. Definitely a pleasure to be in your presence, sir.
No, I appreciate it. It's likewise. You call me Mario.
I can't do that quite yet. I'm still working on that part.
Hey, hey, again, thanks for blessing us and being on the show. Tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, obviously, you stated my name is Dawud Akil, definitely a proud Marine veteran. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, 57 years old, and I am definitely an entrepreneur from the soles of my feet to the top.
57, Dawud. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Unarmored Talk. I'm learning stuff. That's why I love the interviews. Man, if you're 57, there's hope for me. The way you look. Anyway, I'm sorry, man. God, good. All right, go ahead.
Praise God. But other than that, I love entrepreneurship, love business, and I'm very fortunate to have been kind of captain in my ship now for about 27, 28 years.
Wow. Well, you mentioned the word fortunate. And a lot of times I think, I believe, right, that people will associate being fortunate, with successes. You're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're the captain of your own ship, per se. But on your 21st wedding anniversary here recently, I don't know if it's fortunate news or not, but instead of celebrating with your lovely bride of 21 years of matrimony, you're told you have cancer. Holy smoke! Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that was completely unexpected. I'm fairly healthy, still working out. Wanting to still be that Marine of 30 years ago.
Right.
But I had been on a new campaign of eating right, working out daily, and I went to the doctor because on the 24th, actually, I wasn't feeling too well. And to be honest, not to make this bad, but I noticed that my urine was really dark. And so I went on the 24th, and they told me at that time that I had a drug-induced liver infection. Now, I've never smoked in my life.
A drug-induced liver infection.
Never used it.
Okay.
I can still get drunk off of one beer. And they gave me fluids. And they told me they wanted to admit me. And at that time, I was adamant that, nope, I'm not staying in the hospital because my anniversary was the next day with my wife. And of course, because they thought it was pretty severe, I had to sign forms that if I left, against their recommendation, if something happened to me, it released the hospital of liability.
Right.
And I was honest. I just told them, my anniversary is tomorrow. I have a history of taking my wife to dinner, and I am not going to spend my anniversary in a hospital bed without my wife because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I signed their papers, and I told them I'll get through my dinner and I'll come back. And so I proceeded to do just that, took my wife to Ruth Chris. And because I was in so much pain, even though I had a almost $300 bill with a big steak in front of me, I couldn't eat anything. So I literally took my wife to Ruth Chris out in Orange County. One of my sons went with us. I watched them eat, and I couldn't eat anything. And, we celebrated, came back home, and, I told my wife, I need you to take me to the hospital. And so she took me back to the hospital, to the VA, and they admitted me through emergency, and the journey kind of began there. So it was a lot of tests.
Right.
And from there, that next day, or actually that next morning, I found out that I had a pretty large tumor in my gallbladder. It had spread to a bile duct and had also touched my liver.
Wow.
And, that was my anniversary. And of course, the start of now, how do I go home and have this discussion, not just with my wife, but, all our children and grandchildren. So the journey started there.
Wow. So you get this kind of pre-diagnosis before you go out to eat. I imagine there were a lot of emotions. I mean, and let's talk about that part. How were you able to, as you said, celebrate with this information flowing through your brain and dealing with, all human beings are emotional, right? We all have emotions. But how did you deal with that? And what type of emotions did you experience at this dinner? Was it anger? Was it depression? Was it confusion? What was it? And how'd you get through it?
Um, I think when I went, because in the beginning I thought I had a drug-induced liver infection is what I went to dinner thinking.
Okay.
And so in that moment, I wasn't depressed. I wasn't angry. I was more like, I've never taken drugs. I don't drink. I don't smoke.
Right.
I'm thinking this is a misdiagnosis. And honestly, I had just convinced myself I had overworked my liver and kidney because I was taking a lot of protein shakes and
Yeah.
creatine, glutamine, trying to work out. So I
Right.
just assumed that I had overdid it with those things. And so I honestly, at that time, I felt, well, that's an easy fix. I'll, cleanse my kidneys and my liver. I'll
Right.
proteins go and I'll just keep on soldering. That was the thought process.
Yeah,
So
like it'll just buff out. I just drink
yeah,
drink some water, make some Motrin like we do in the military, and it'll buff out.
yeah, exactly. So for me, in that moment, it was more or less, this is a hiccup in the road, but like a true soldier, I'm like, I got a wound, but there's still a fight to be fought. So
Right.
when I get back to the base camp. So I was literally just kind of in a state like, no big deal.
Wow. And so the next day is when the accurate diagnosis is presented to you. Talk to the viewers and listeners about what emotionally went on after you realized with the accurate diagnosis that it's not just a little bit of protein here and there, or you're 37 and you can't lift as much as you used to, but but now it's a serious diagnosis and it's not what you thought.
Right. So once I got in and the next morning of the 26th,
Yeah.
obviously I was in a lot of pain. And when the doctors came and spoke to me, I'll be honest, when they first came in, because they came in on me like a group. So
Mm,
I was under attack. I did get a little afraid because there were like 5 doctors. And, usually when
right.
people come, you're going to get, it's something serious. And so I was a little afraid at that moment. Um, but when they actually start telling me what the outcome was, oddly enough, I actually felt a little relief. And I think for people who are ill
Wow.
with cancer to think there was relief, because most people are very afraid of the cancer. Uh,
Right.
for me, Sergeant Major, cancer is something that my family deals with throughout. And
Mm,
probably I'm not aware of anyone who's passed away in my family, with the exception of one person, maybe in the last 30 years, who didn't die from cancer.
right.
So because that's something I'm so accustomed to, I actually felt relief because I felt like, oh, you're telling me something that I'm already used to dealing with. So I'm prepared for this fight. I was kind of literally thinking like, whew, you're not telling me I have, some other injury that's going to be really life threatening, even though what I have is that. But I felt like this was a battle that I was built to fight. And so
Yeah.
uh, I immediately kind of felt my stoicism. Like, okay, tell me what's the next steps. Tell me what I need to do. I had a conversation with my higher power, and I'm like, you just tell me what I need to do, and let's get to it. Uh,
And that's interesting how you brought up how your unique life experience is not you experiencing, cancer diagnosis yourself, but being around other people that have experienced this serious disease, right?
yes,
It's interesting how you brought that up that how those life experiences influence your emotions where it wasn't fear, it wasn't depression, it wasn't, anxiety. Because of those life experiences, it allowed you to have this feeling of clarity, if you will. where now you're like, okay, now I understand what I have. Was there any moments that after you had this moment of clarity, you're thinking through things, was there any moment where you didn't feel that things still weren't clear to you, or you didn't feel that comfortable, confident as you did when you got the initial, diagnosis?
Um, the one thing that made me afraid of the whole scenario had nothing to do with my personal battle. I was completely okay with that. I'm not really good at sharing. Um,
Right. Unarmored talk.
right. Well, um, but my thought was, how could I tell my wife that it was something else and just
Mm.
battle? And I have
Wow.
kids, and so the most difficult part of this was not that I was the one that was going to have to fight a battle. It was what would be the effect on my wife and my children and my grandchildren. That's
Mm.
the only scary part because, you know, to me, I'm that rock in my unit
Yeah.
and family. And if I go down, what will happen to them? So my
Right.
fear was more related to how would my wife, how would my children emotionally process this, and their uneasiness would make the battle harder for me because I would then be focused on helping them instead of me focused on beating this disease. So that was probably the scariest part of it, is how they would deal with the results.
Yeah. Wow. And that's the way you took an external thought process, vice an internal. I mean, that's amazing to highlight. I don't know what I would do, but listening to you, just reminded me that sometimes you have to think outwardly, than inwardly to get through an emotional situation. So that's amazing. So you're thinking, okay, how am I going to explain to my beautiful bride and my family that what I thought was a little, you know, protein and just need some water. That this thing is serious, and and now you're thinking, how do I tell them? Talk to us about how did you think through that and develop kind of a level of comfort where you finally gave your family the news.
Right. Well, and I won't say that it was helpful, but I actually spent 10 days in the hospital. And so because of that time and because of COVID, no one could come and see me.
Mm,
Obviously, I
yeah.
didn't prepare, with my phone and everything. So I had time to, one, get more clarity with the doctors. I actually went through a really bad trauma during the 10 days and I almost passed away. I found out during that time that I have a bad reaction to oxycodone.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
and that's a painkiller that they gave to me to help me deal with the pain because I'd had a couple procedures and it actually paralyzed me. Matter of fact, I actually thought that I was going to die. Um, I got the oxycodone,
Yeah.
and like 15 minutes later, I knew something was wrong. I started feeling my legs get weak. Um, I literally tried to get out of the bed and go to the nurse, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. And then I felt my arms going numb.
Mm,
And kind of ironically, I was close enough to the bed where I fell on the bed. I grabbed that button to push for a nurse.
right.
They ran in, and this was day number 3. And I literally lost all my feeling in my extremities. My stomach started going numb. And for a second time, I had about 12 doctors, around me. They had a crash cart. I got I forgot the Norcam, the drug to reverse the effects of another drug pushed into.
Right.
I ended up in ICU and the airbags to massage your muscles and CAT scans because they weren't sure whether I was having a stroke or a heart attack.
Right.
So kind of the odd thing was that was transitioning, and really in that time the only thing I could say to the doctors, I was emotional, I was actually kind of crying. I honestly thought I was going to die, and I even told the one doctor, I said, I can't believe this is how I'm going to go.
Wow.
And I told this doctor, or actually a young nurse, I said, I just need you to do one thing. And they're literally as doctors poking me everywhere and doing things. And I said, I just need you to tell my wife that I wasn't afraid and I went out like a Marine.
Wow. Man, that's powerful.
But sorry.
No, it's Unarmored Talk. This is help. It's to help us and then to help our viewers and listeners, because while living, we will experience life events every single day, and we don't even know what's going to come our way, tomorrow. So I just appreciate, Dawud, you're removing your armor to help lots of people.
Yeah. So we got that through that. I spent a couple of days in the ICU, and I got back, and then I was, in my regular ward for about another 5.5, 6 days.
Yeah.
So when I got released by that time, I had that time to get through. I got another procedure, and by then I was able to use a phone in the hospital. So I called my wife. We had the conversation, and the immediate blessing I got was my wife instantly became my commanding officer.
You sure she wasn't always?
Right. Well, she was, but she let me know right then and there of what were going to be the steps and how I was going to proceed, and that she was fine. And her piece, and she made a statement to me, is that I'm focusing on where we are right now. I'm not worried about something down the road. And because I knew she was at a peaceful place,
Yeah.
it put me at peace. Because even though I think I'm a pretty tough guy, I do know that my wife is in charge. She tells me I'm the head, but she's the neck. So she's going to control what happens to the head. And it was just great. And so once I got home, her and I had a couple conversations. We hadn't talked to our children yet. And so we talked about how we would talk to them. And so we were trying to get them all to the house at one time, which we were unsuccessful in doing because our kids are in a couple of different places.
Right.
But we kind of developed a plan, and we ended up, I have 9 children. And so we sat down with groups of them. I think it was 3, 4, and 2. And so once we told them, the girls took it a little bit harder than the boys.
Right.
But at that moment, I think because they saw me, I was still relatively mobile. It was helpful. And I think because they could see me and they didn't see fear in my face, and, I'm pretty belligerent naturally. So they saw that. And I think that gave them some peace that they knew I would fight. And, then we were starting chemo. So that was just that process. But really the hero in the whole process was my wife. She kept my kids grounded. She kept our grandkids grounded. She was communicating with them every day. She became the link to them checking
Right.
in. Immediately I found out that my wife was actually a lot stronger than I was. I took a little issue with that, but
the circumstance revealed the true character of the commanding general.
Yes, immediately.
So, and I know our viewers and listeners will probably, I'm going to believe that they would want to know currently. So how are you doing today? Today is December the 10th of 2020. And so how are you doing today?
Well, today, I honestly, sorry, Major, I used your podcast as a marker. I've been doing pretty well through this process, and I got a word early when I came home from my higher power to fight, which I was comfortable with that, but and that was something that I'm not comfortable with. But the concept was for me to share this journey to try to be a help to other people, and more importantly, because I'm a business owner, it meant that I have to share my journey, that I'm still trying to grow my business because I have a lot of people who work with me.
Right.
And so I took that process. I've been sharing on LinkedIn this journey, but for the last almost 3 months, I thought I was doing fine. This week I have chemo on Mondays.
Yeah.
And it takes me a day and a half or 2 to bounce back. But this week was my most difficult week since the process began. And it was Tuesday, probably midday, and I felt myself going into a depression. And couldn't sleep all night. I had a horrible Wednesday, and I literally just felt that, okay, I can't fight anymore. And for me, I'm fortunate to have a good support system,
Right.
but I was ready to tap out.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I can't do another chemo. I just have to have a conversation with my wife and my kids to say I can't take it anymore, and I got to go out on my terms. And
Right.
you know, my body chemo makes you extremely exhausted, soreness through your muscles. My feet, my hands are tingly because of the high dosage of chemo that I get when
Yeah.
I'm not eating well. And I was honestly, I knew I was going into a depression. I
Yeah.
felt it, and I didn't want to say anything to my wife. And I'm thinking, how do I take this next step? Because I'm tired. And so Wednesday morning, the only thing that I knew to do was, normally I would go for a run, but I'm not capable of doing that right now.
Right. Right.
I decided to just go out and walk, and that walk was something that I was able to do to make me feel like I still had fight in me, some control, a willingness to not give in. And on that walk, I called my spiritual mother and father, who happens to be another retired Marine gunny out at 29 Palms with Sergeant Major Dutchin. And I didn't get him, but he's my spiritual father.
Right.
My spiritual mother and father. And I just knew, I just called him, and I didn't get him, but I left a message saying, Gunny Brock, whenever you get a chance, call me. I just need you to pray for me. And so I think I walked about a mile and a half, got back home, and the walk took so much out of me, I passed out.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
woke up, he called me, he gave me prayer, and it was just the right thing at the right time. My wife was always doing what she was doing. I didn't even tell her I was feeling this way. We had that conversation actually last night.
Right.
But I got through it. I woke up, went walking again this morning, and I just felt like, even thinking of you, Sergeant Major, as a mentor, it's like your podcast was the next thing I had to make sure that I need to be here for.
Yeah.
Instead of me focusing on how I felt, I focused on what I need to do. And that meant I need to be front and center and present for your podcast. And that also became a part of my sharing. And so
I appreciate it, and I may be a retired sergeant major, but in my eyes, you're you're the galaxy sergeant major, and I report to you, man. So I appreciate that. Is there anything that you would like to leave our viewers and listeners? Again, you shared some amazing, in my eyes, amazing information where thought, I believe, the way you think really allowed you to be aware of those feelings and emotions and influence the outcome even currently today. So is there any last things you want to leave our viewers and listeners, my friend?
I think the most important thing, or that I feel is important, is that we reach out to one another. This diagnosis, the one thing that has helped me with is connecting with other people who are going through what I'm going through, the different types of cancer, or in any type of situation. I now know how important it is to connect. And also, just as important is to be someone willing to, almost like your podcast, say, become unarmored and share, because not everybody has a support system. And,
Right.
that's something that's important to me. And at the same time, because I'm an entrepreneur, I think it's important for me to also still reflect that even though I have a pretty serious situation I'm dealing with,
Right.
I have an obligation to my company. I still have an obligation to all the agents that work with me. And I need them to know that regardless, I'm still on the battlefield with them. I won't fall back. I will still stand right out in front. I just move a little bit slower. And so for me, I think anyone who's an entrepreneur and if something happens, it's still your responsibility to lead from the front. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Nice. No, I like it. And if where can people find you?
Well, our company is called JCI Agency. Our website is www.jci-agency.com. We're the same thing, JCI Agency Inc. on Facebook and Instagram, and then same thing on LinkedIn. So would love to hear from anyone. We are a company that helps people who are going into business, anything from the corporations to their accounting, taxes, bookkeeping, any kind of insurance you can imagine, which, I definitely want to say something that was really important is I'm a life insurance broker as well. And it was this situation that made what I do, which I knew was so important, came home, because today I am actually utilizing one of my life insurance policies while I can't work. Unfortunately, I had to plan my funeral, but it's paid for. And I had to make provisions for, if this doesn't go well, to make sure that my wife and children are okay. And those things that I took care of because that's my profession are now benefiting my family. And so that becomes really important, because many of us are not prepared, even though we think we have time. Things like what happened to me, you realize you don't.
Yeah. Wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from Dawud Akil. And for Unarmored Talk podcast, you can subscribe and watch this episode at Mario P. Field /YouTube. Put that in your search engine. You go to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Buzzsprout, and download the audio. And also, if you like the show, leave us a rating and review. But until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you, Sergeant Major.
No, you're welcome, my friend.